Good morning, everybody. Good morning. That was nice. That was good. You guys sound awesome, by the way. Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome to worship this morning. It is the day of Pentecost. You know that's true because there's red everywhere up front. It is the day in the church where we celebrate the Spirit shaking things up and firing us up. And so that's why we've gathered here today. My name is Jeff Sinabaldo. I was the pastor down in Old Saybrook at St. Paul for about 7 years. The last 4 years, I've been teaching over at Notre Dame High School in West Haven. It's an all boys for now. We're going co-ed in 25. High school, Catholic high school, and I teach freshman religion class and do campus ministry. One of the ways I would describe what I do is I hang out with teenage boys who are mostly interested in hockey. And I tell them about Jesus. So that's what I get to do every day. And yesterday was graduation, which was kind of fun because it was my first class of freshmen that made it all the way through. So that was kind of special. So that was lovely. We've got joyful noise here today. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So when it's time for communion, unless you are a person that loves claustrophobia, I would suggest coming up on this side and we'll all just commune over here, okay? That way we're not all up in their stuff. Sound good? Okay, who was playing piano earlier in the other room? You were. Awesome. Keep doing that. That's great. All right, let's turn now to what God has done for us in Jesus Christ in the unity of the Spirit. So let's find confession and forgiveness. And I invite you to stand.
A reading from Acts. When the day of Pentecost had come, the apostles were all together in one place, and suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability. Now there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem. And as this sound, the crowd gathered and was bewildered because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each. Amazed and astonished, they asked, "Are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear each of us in our own native language? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, and Cappadocia, Pontus, and Asia, Phrygia, and Pamphylia, Egypt, and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and other visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs. In our own languages, we hear them speaking about God's deeds of power." All were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What does this mean?" But others sneered and said, "They are filled with new wine." But Peter, standing with the 11, raised his voice and addressed them. "Men of Judea, and all who live in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and listen to what I say. Indeed, these are not drunk, as you suppose, for it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. No, this is what was spoken through the prophet Joel. In the last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams, even upon my slaves, both men and women. In those days I will pour out my Spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will show portents in the heavens above, and signs on the earth below, blood and fire, and smoky mist. The sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon to blood, before the coming of the Lord's great and glorious day. Then everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved." Word of God, word of life.
Thanks be to God. Holy Gospel according to John. Glory to you, O Lord. Jesus said, "When the Advocate comes, whom I will send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth, who comes from the Father. He will testify on my behalf. You also are to testify, because you have been with me from the beginning. I did not say these things to you from the beginning because I was with you, but now I am going to him who sent me. Yet none of you asked me, where are you going? But because I have said these things to you, sorrow has filled your heart. Nevertheless, I tell you the truth. It is to your advantage that I go away, for if I do not go away, the advocate will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. And when he comes, he will prove the world wrong about sin and righteousness and judgment. About sin, because they do not believe in me. About righteousness, because I'm going to the Father and you will see me no longer. About judgment, because the ruler of this world has been condemned. I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all the truth. For he will not speak on his own, but will speak whatever he hears. And he will declare to you the things that are to come. He will glorify me, because he will take what is mine and declare it to you. All that the Father has is mine. For this reason I said that he will take what is mine and declare it to you. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. Wind and fire. These are the images that we hear in the Acts of the Apostles reading. Good job with that, by the way, all those names. You get an A+ as a lector when you get that one, so good job. Wind and fire. These are the images in the book of Acts of what happens when the Spirit comes. The wind shakes things up, shakes them up, shakes us up. And the fire comes and burns like tongues upon their heads, whatever that means. But also to turn us loose into the world to do the job that Jesus has given us, and that is to tell the world about him. Wind and fire. When I was a little kid, I grew up outside of Chicago. My parents still live in the house I grew up in. They live in a raised ranch. If you're familiar with the architecture of a house like that, you come into the foyer and then you have to make a choice to go either up or down. So there's not really a basement or there's not really a second floor. It's kind of a halvesies on each of that. And then off the kitchen in the back is a deck, which again is not really, it's raised, but it's not really on the second floor. It's more like my height, about 6 feet tall, which now seems fine. But when you're a little guy, it seems really big. And they enclosed that area over time. It became the place where we kept like the lawnmower and all the garden stuff. But when I was a little kid, it was open. So it was just the beams, those nice 4x4 poles that held the deck up, unexposed, or just totally exposed out there. And I used to play on that, especially when my friends were busy doing something. Like we weren't going to go ride bikes, or we weren't going to go inside and play Star Wars. I just needed to find something to do. So I would go out in the back, and there were really two games that I kind of played to entertain myself using the poles that held up the deck. One was garbage truck collector guy. I thought I was so impressed as a kid with the garbage truck. It would come flying down the street, and there were usually two guys hanging on the back on this little platform and a handle just to hang on. I swear they were going 1,000 miles an hour. It was probably 10. But they were cruising, wind in their hair, blowing. They would stop, they'd get off, they'd get all the garbage in front of our house, they'd put it in the back of the truck, they'd hit that button, and the big noise would happen as the trash compactor thing would start, and then they would hop back on, and they would go off to the next house, again, 1,000 miles an hour, with the wind in their hair. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. It was awesome. So I would do that. I'd hang off of that pole in the back, and I would collect things from along the yard and throw them under the deck, and then my parents would, what is all this stuff doing down here? So that was one game I played. The other game I played was firefighter guy, because again, how cool is it when the firefighter hangs off the back of the truck? We don't do that anymore, but that was pretty cool. So I would do that, and then I would grab the garden hose, which again was right there, and I would put out imaginary fires in my backyard, I think to the entertainment of my mother, and the bewilderment of my father, who kept asking, why do you keep watering the crabapple tree? But I would do that, and I thought it was really fun. Wind and fire. Of course, when I got older, the rules changed around some of these vehicles, and I think the economy of things changed too. So then it wasn't two guys on the back of the garbage truck, it was one. And finally, it wasn't any, and the poor driver had to get out at every house, come around back, load the garbage, come back around and drive off to the next house. The game got a lot less fun after that. So I kind of didn't do that much anymore. And I never had the opportunity to be a garbage man, but I thought to myself, I missed something. That looked like it was just really a great time. But as I mentioned to the kids, I did become a firefighter. That's a long story. Maybe we can share over coffee. But I've been doing it about 5.5, 6 years. And I will tell you, it is everything that you see that it is. It's exciting, it's fun, it's dangerous, it's helpful, there's a camaraderie among us, it's all those things. But you get to see really close up what the power of what wind and fire can really do. I've been to many incidents. There was a fire this morning that I missed, actually. But the most impressive fire that I've been at firsthand was about 6 years ago almost. It was December of 2019. I was still a probie then. The alarm went off on my pager and on my phone and kept going off on my phone. It's like, okay, this is the real deal. And I got down to the firehouse. I missed the first engine due, but I was on the second one, and we went to the scene. Where this was, I'm from Old Saybrook. This is right down on the shoreline in a neighborhood called Chalker Beach, where the houses are beach houses. Some of them are year-round, but not all of them. And they're packed in really, really tight. It's kind of one of those little old neighborhoods. And a fire had started in someone's garage, and that house was fully involved, and it was starting on the house next to it. Oh, and did I mention there was a 50-mile-an-hour wind coming across Long Island onto the land and the neighborhood. It was impressive and powerful, and it looked like it was going to take us a long time. And we had lots of help. I think we had 11 other departments helping us. And we were doing a lot of work to try to get this thing under control, and it felt like we were just spitting at it. And it didn't really change until our fireboat had come around down the Connecticut River and across the shore, and with the wind at its back and the water cannon, finally got enough water on it to kind of change the course. Wind, and fire, almost an untamable fire. That once it's unleashed, it's wild, it's dangerous, it's impressive. This is what Pentecost is kind of about. So as we meet up with these folks in the book of Acts, they've been through a lot. They've been with Jesus this whole time. They've seen him do all the ministry that he's done, the way he's healed people and helped people and forgiven people. And at least at this point in the story, they've already been through the great ordeal, right? They've seen him be betrayed and arrested and taken away, and he suffered, and he was condemned, and he died on the cross. And then he came to be with them. He was alive. He showed up. He talked to them. He had them touch him, right? They ate with him. And he gave them this job to go out and tell others about me. Your job is to go share some good news for all the people, that I bring forgiveness and new life to everyone. But the Spirit will come. The Spirit will come. That's what we hear about in this gospel. It's a little before all of this goes down. And Jesus tells them exactly what's going to happen. The Spirit is going to tell you the truth. The truth about sin and about righteousness and about judgment. We know ourselves to be sinful, right? Things we've done and left undone. We confess that this morning and gather around that truth each week. We know that our righteousness is not how we're doing. It's not because we're so good at the things we do. It's on account of him, right? It's Christ's righteousness, the one who dies for you and for me. And it's about judgment. Judgment of this world, yes, but also judgment of you. Judgment that, yes, in our sin we're broken and unclean, and yet at the same time we're loved and redeemed and saved and brought into a new community because of what Jesus has done for us. And so when the Spirit comes, Jesus is saying, he's going to teach you that. And we see what happens in this story when that finally comes to fruition. It comes rattling through the house. It shakes everything up. It shakes them up. It shakes us up. And it comes like a fire that can't really be tamed. It's dancing across their heads somehow, but what it does is it sets them loose. Free from the fear that they were hanging on to, fear from their own perhaps guilt and shame, perhaps thinking that they weren't up to the challenge. And yet the Spirit sent them out. Wind and fire. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? It's hard to think if we could really experience that for ourselves. I mean, these guys are blowing the roof off of the place this morning, but we all know this, right? The church as a whole is really struggling right now. We're in decline. We're wondering what's next. How do we put it back together? What'll change? Are we up for it? Are we going to be like the trash guy who loses his job because they do it a different way? Is that really it? But then Jesus reminds us that the Spirit comes. Like a wind that shakes us up, and like a fire that fires us up, calling us back to the job that we've been given. The job to make him known. Years ago, long before I was a firefighter, I was in my first church in South Dakota, of all places. 22 years ago. I had hair then. I was there about a week. I was in western South Dakota. I was kind of in the little transition land between the prairie and the Black Hills. And I was about 45 minutes away from like Mount Rushmore. So I went up to Mount Rushmore. And I was there in the parking lot, and I wanted to see the horizon, because you could look down and see, it seemed like forever, including the little town where we were living and serving. But there were some people already there looking and oohing and eyeing. And I kind of walked over to see what was going on, and there had been a fire that had started below. And it was spreading, not even by minute, but by second. You could just see this thing growing and growing and growing and growing. What had happened, we found out later, is a transformer blew behind a youth center in one of the nearby towns. It caught the building on fire, which caught the trees on fire. And on a windy day like it was, there was often windy days out in the West, it was just taking off. And within minutes, they had all of us evacuate and get out of there. Like I said, it's usually like a 45-minute drive there. I think it took us a couple hours to get home because they rerouted us a totally different way. And there I was about a week into my ministry there, and I spent just about most of my days in the gym, which was the shelter for people who had been evacuated for their homes, just introducing myself and getting to know them, a trial by fire, I suppose. Wind and fire. It's impressive. It's powerful. It's dangerous. We're not sure if we can tame it. We're not supposed to tame it. Think in this sermon that Peter gives, he talks about visions and dreams, hopes for the future, right? Of what God can do through us and in us for the sake of others. And where do we try to put that fire out in our lives? Around each other. It's a little too scary. It's a little too dangerous, perhaps. But today we hear this promise again that the Spirit has come. Wind and fire. We're not supposed to put it out. I don't think we're supposed to stoke it up either. It's really not about us, is it? It's about what God is doing in the world. As I told the kids, the Spirit really has one job. It might happen in different ways, but it's really one thing: to call us back to who Jesus is and what he does for you and for me and the world. This truth about sin and righteousness and judgment. Christ has come to redeem the world, to save the world, to create all things new, and sends the Spirit to you and to me to shake us up and to fire us up and to go out and see the spread. You don't have to even hang off your parents' deck to see it happen. Peace be with you.